Okay, we're going to take a look at a Senate hearing today. Today is February 6th, 2017, and we're going to take a look at a Senate hearing and specifically some comments by Senator Warner and with regard to Bitcoin. And I'm going to put the link to this entire video in the description, so if you want to see the entire video, you can do that. So let's watch a little bit here and then I'll comment.
Senator Warner.
I usually agree with my friend from Louisiana. I think we may be on top of something that is transformational, and I don't think you can separate the underlying distributed ledger or blockchain from some of these crypto assets. And if we had the
in his open right there, you can see where he's making the comment that you really can't separate blockchain technology from the cryptocurrencies, which of course Bitcoin is the dominant cryptocurrency, if you will, by far. And a lot of people, it's popular in the media now to say that, well, we don't know about Bitcoin, but blockchain, that's huge. And you can't have it both ways. You can't say, okay, blockchain's all that, but Bitcoin isn't. They are the same thing. And most of these other programs that are designed to run on other blockchains other than Bitcoin are total scams. Most altcoins out there are total scams. Even Ethereum is a mess, a hot mess, if you will. It's been hacked. It's been set back. It's got all kinds of issues. And there's actually a video by Andreas Antonopoulos that addresses this issue. So really, the real use for blockchain technology is a cryptocurrency, and Bitcoin is that. And that will be the dominant use case for blockchain going forward. It's really one of the few legitimate use cases where you need that level of security, decentralized security, for a currency that governments cannot control, central banks cannot control, and so on and so forth. So let's continue watching here.
same rate of increase that the next 2 years that we've had the last couple of years, we're talking now a couple $100 billion, we'd be at north of $20 trillion caught up in this area by 2020.
So it's very interesting. He says $20 trillion by 2020. And it's not a coincidence that 2020 is the next Bitcoin halving. That's the time when the number of Bitcoins that the miners produce is cut in half for the same period of time. And this happens every 4 years. It's designed into the Bitcoin protocol to where every 4 years the amount of Bitcoin that are produced is cut in half. This diminishing supply is built into the system, and ultimately it will result in a total of 21 million being mined by something like 2040 or something. They don't have the exact date, but 21 million total Bitcoin will be mined, and it's a diminishing supply as that timeline goes along, because every 4 years the amount is halved. And the reason they do that is they want this currency to be deflationary. They don't want it to lose its value like the dollar and other currencies become devalued. They want this to actually hold its value, thereby encouraging people to save and keep Bitcoin and spend them when they need to, but basically to save. And that's what we were many, many years ago. Our grandmas and all always said save for a rainy day. Well, people don't like to save now because they know that their dollar isn't going to be worth anything in 10 years, so they just go ahead and spend it. With Bitcoin, people will be encouraged to save, and it won't be manipulated, and it won't unlimited numbers won't be created like they can do with fiat currency, dollars, and other currencies. So that's a key point, and that's probably why he mentioned 2020. Let's continue on here.
And I think I remember back, I was lucky enough to get in the cell phone business back in the early 80s, and everybody thought it was going to be a small business, and they were wrong, and I got rich. I think we're looking at the same kind of transformation about to take place, and we are going to have to wrap our arms around it. We've talked about some of the consumer protection issues, but we've got money laundering issues. We've got cybersecurity issues. A third of the Bitcoin exchanges have been cyber hacked between 2009 and 2015.
Clearly talking here about the potential growth of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. And really, when people say cryptocurrencies, they're really talking about Bitcoin because it's the only one that has a chance of having worldwide adoption and really being used by people. All these altcoins, they don't have a chance. There's like thousands of them, and that they're going to go by the wayside. Just like in the early days of the automobile, there were thousands of manufacturers of automobiles that were trying to make horseless carriages, right? And then Ford came along with the technology that really worked, and he dominated the market. And this is the way Bitcoin is. Bitcoin is totally dominating. And unlike Ford, Bitcoin is building the whole worldwide infrastructure that everybody's going to use. And there would be no reason to have like a Pontiac come along and try to build another infrastructure because everybody's going to be using the Bitcoin infrastructure. So it really will be one virtual worldwide currency, and that will be Bitcoin. And that's what he's talking about here and why it's going to be so valuable. So let's continue listening.
I'm not exactly sure what the right regime ought to be, but I would argue that, well, I commend the Treasury Secretary for putting a working group together, but I would argue this is the reason we created FSOC in the first place, that this rises potentially to the level of a systemically relevant event. And I'd just be curious whether you believe, and I commend what both of you are trying to do, but whether this ought to elevate to an FSOC level analysis.
So, Senator, I had the same question you had, which is there's a big rise here. If it does keep going, is this a systemic issue? Which is one of the reasons we brought it up at FSOC, talked about it at FSOC. I again commend the Treasury Secretary for forming the working group. I want to go back to separating ICOs and cryptocurrencies. ICOs that are securities offerings, we should regulate them like we regulate securities offerings. End of story.
Let me make sure, because I've got a couple more points.
Yeah, thank you, Senator. Just real quickly, on the issue of disclosure, sometimes what we're seeing is not a problem of absence of disclosure, it's false disclosure. And false disclosure is often fraud, and I think we need to step in there. But just in terms of discussion, as Chairman Clayton mentioned, we have begun discussions at FSOC. In addition, there's also been discussions led by Chairman Clayton at the Financial Stability Board and also at IOSCO, which is the International Organization of Securities Commissioners. So these discussions are taking place at the right levels of debate.
Amazing here, and what kind of shows that these folks are pretty much clueless regarding all of this stuff, is they're worried about the ICOs, these altcoins being issued and some people being ripped off, because they invested in something that's not really legitimate and, they lost some money, right? They're worried about those, and they're not worried about the 1,000-pound gorilla in the room, which is really what Senator Warner is talking about, which is Bitcoin is going to become huge, and people are going to start using Bitcoin as a medium of exchange worldwide, and these folks are going to be powerless to stop it. If Bitcoin keeps growing at the rate that it's growing, at some point it'll be too big for them to try to kill it off. And right now they're worried about all these little ICOs, these piddly little ICOs out there, and they're not paying attention to the 1,000-pound gorilla in the room, which is Bitcoin. Pretty funny stuff, if you ask me. Let's keep listening.
But there's so much more to be done.
And again, to my friend from Louisiana point, we've got this, we're focused a lot on Bitcoin and crypto assets, cryptocurrencies, and I think there's even definitional issues here. But you've got a whole new platform called Ethereum where they're creating, file sharing or extra computer time. I'm not sure what kind of assets those fall into. Are they potentially regulated within your realm, or if there is a trading exchange, a tokenization exchange between excess computer time? I'm not sure where that fits at this point.
I'm kind of surprised he brought up Ethereum here, because you can do a lot of similar things on Bitcoin, and Ethereum is probably going to ultimately fail because it's like I say, it's a hot mess. But he makes a good point that there's going to be all kinds of things happening on the blockchain, and these guys just have no idea. I mean, they're going after these little ICOs again, and they're not looking at the big picture as far as how disruptive this new technology and Bitcoin are going to be. And he's looking at it, Warner's comparing it to the cell phone industry and how disruptive that's been. I think it's going to be even bigger than that. This is on equal footing with the internet itself. This is going to be every bit as important as the internet itself, because we're dealing with money here. We're dealing with people's livelihood. We're dealing with their life savings. This is a big deal here, folks. And I think these folks are just starting to wake up and just starting to realize, and with Warner's opening comments about how huge it will be, they're just starting to realize the significance of this. But a lot of the people on this panel, I think, were probably surprised by what Warner said and probably are pretty clueless still. And it'll probably take a couple of years before these folks really understand how huge this is going to be. Let's keep listening.
The definition of a security, I believe, the people who wrote the 34 Act and the 33 Act, they were smart. They did it on a principled basis, and they basically said, if you're giving people money in exchange for a future development of a business with the hope of a return, and whether that return comes in the form of server time or your ability to sell server time, it's a security.
But there are been, and I concur with the approach you've taken in terms of the ICOs, and I think there's been some very bad behavior. Yet certain ICOs, the SEC has not stopped, others they have stopped. And are you going to go back and re-review the ones that have gone forward?
Let me say another thing about the 33 and 34 Act. When they were written, there was a great recognition that there was a tremendous amount of securities activity in this country, and that we were going to rely on gatekeepers to help us enforce those, and liability to help us enforce those rules. Accountants, lawyers, underwriters, sellers, and the like. I'm counting on those people to do their job, and I've made that clear.
Let me ask Chairman Giancarlo, what we did, and one of the things I'm concerned about was that I think we may have moved too fast on allowing, for example, futures trading on Bitcoin. And I would just wonder, you've allowed future trading contracts on Bitcoin, yet the SEC has not allowed ETFs. I'm just worried that we need a much more coordinated effort, because I think the potential writ large amongst crypto assets and the underlying blockchain could be as transformational as wireless was years ago. And I think we're going to need a much more coordinated effort. I know my time's expired, but if you could both quickly comment on that, I'd appreciate it.
I believe it is critically important that we coordinate on this. I believe that we are all both individually and collectively understanding our authorities, understanding this new technology working.
This guy seems kind of shaken by Senator Warner's statements. He's like, oh my gosh, this guy's saying this thing's going to be huge, and I thought it was just this little thing, off on the sidelines. Anyway, I'll put the link so you can watch this entire video. But it's kind of a wake-up call to me that these folks are talking about this, and especially some of the comments that Warner made. So clearly there are some people in government that realize that this thing is going to be huge, that Bitcoin is going to just totally explode and be this literally 1,000-pound gorilla that they're going to have to wrestle with down the road, and that could really make them obsolete. Get to the point where people can take care of their own destiny, take care of their own finances, and not be manipulated by governments and by currencies being printed at the whim of central banks and so on and so forth, that people can actually take control of their financial future. The little guy, for example, the unbanked, and people in third world countries, everybody can use this. This is worldwide, and this is what is really amazing about this Bitcoin revolution that we're going to witness here over the next 10 years or so. This whole thing's going to play out. So exciting times ahead. Please subscribe, pound that like button, share this video, and we are going to keep a close eye on this. And by the way, follow Adam Meister as well, Adam Meister, the Bitcoin Meister, and anything that Andreas Antonopoulos has out there, go ahead and take a look at that. And Godspeed to you all.